Curvy women, I'm talking to you. There's one thing I know for sure. You cannot shame yourself into a smaller body. Have you ever found yourself waiting for the perfect body before you truly start living your life? Well, it's time to stop waiting. I want to introduce you to Body Love Boot Camp, a transformative program designed to help you embrace your body as you are. In this journey, you'll shift your mindset, break free from limiting beliefs, and finally silence that inner critic. Through guided meditations, gentle yoga, group coaching, one-on-one coaching, and powerful journaling prompts, you'll reconnect with yourself in a deeper way. You'll be part of an amazing community of women who are on the same path. Together, we are stronger. Whether you're struggling with your body image or simply want to take the first step of a more empowered version of yourself, Body Love Bootcamp is your opportunity to reclaim your confidence. Sign up at emmawalkinshaw.com.au Body Love Bootcamp and take the first step towards a more fulfilling, loving relationship with your body. Don't wait, your transformation starts here.
Welcome to Celebrate a Sister podcast. I'm your host, Emma Walkinshaw. I'm a transformational coach. I'm also the founder of Embody Me program and the creator of 21 Minutes of Morning Magic. You may also find me on the yoga mat leading yoga sessions and also running retreats here in Australia and internationally. Here on the podcast, I bring you some pretty incredible guests. We talk all things self-belief, body acceptance, personal development, outdated beauty standards, and we also call BS on the toxic diet culture, accepting the beautiful bodies we were born into, letting go of all the beliefs, and raising our self-awareness. I also come to you from time to time with a little solo episode, a little Life According to Emma moment. I'm so glad you're here. Enjoy.
A big warm welcome to Celebrate a Sister podcast. Today, I have the honour and the pleasure of sitting with Kerry Rowett. Kerry is a business energetics mentor and intuitive guide for high-achieving entrepreneurs. She skillfully combines business energetics, healing, and psychology to empower CEOs to excel in their roles. Kerry specializes in releasing blocks and aligning clients with their inner wisdom, values, and priorities, enabling them to elevate their professional identities and achieve greater success. Her offerings include a fabulous mastermind and personalized one-on-one sessions, all designed to produce the results for clients that they desire. Kerry's also the creator of Align and Attract, the course, the book, and the podcast. And her latest project, The Business Paradigm Shift, developed through thousands of hours of client work, is taught through a transformative 6-month mastermind, helping clients evolve their business. Welcome, Kerry.
Thank you so much for having me, Emma. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Oh, so good to chat with you and reconnect. We met a couple of years ago in Uluru. We met and you spoke and took the whole group. I was there on a beautiful business conference and had the pleasure of you taking us all through an incredible what would we say? It was a process. I remember, you spoke and you shared with us, but then took us through a process. I then also started to listen to your incredible podcast. And you had some really great tools in your podcast. So, Kerry, thank you. You have been great in my business journey and many others. I know that for sure. So I want to hand over to you, and I would love for you to share with all of our beautiful listeners what your purpose and passion is on this planet, and tell us about your beautiful business, energetics, and how you support people.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk with you about all of this. And so I started my business back in 2009, and I started out as a kinesiologist. And so I studied kinesiology for 3 years, and I opened up in Melbourne, and I was seeing clients in person, one-to-one, just one afternoon a week. And the following year, I took the leap and built my business to a full-time capacity. And that was a fairly speedy timeline to be booked out with, 15 or so clients a week. And when I worked with a business coach the following year, she said to me, Kerry, you're obviously doing something right. You just need to figure out what it is and bottle it. And as soon as she said that to me, I knew what the answer was. And the word that came through to me was alignment. And this is what I was doing. I was aligning my own energy with my goals. And when my own blocks and limitations were coming up, and my fears and my worries, which most people have in the earlier days of business and beyond, I would be clearing those blocks and continuing to align to what it is that I did want. And it was at that point, this was actually in 2011, I downloaded my alignment process, which is the process that you got to experience at Tina Tower's beautiful conference in Uluru. And so I do still work with that process to this day. It's very simple in essence, but what I have found after having taken thousands of people through this process is it can be really transformative. And I think sometimes when we allow ourselves to really tap in spiritually to that deeper place, we're able to bring through these kind of tools that can be very transformative for people. And so I did end up evolving that work, and out of that process that turned into a course, and also over time it was a book and a podcast and so on. And so bringing us up to today, I now still do work with clients one-on-one, but not in person. Ever since 2014, I've worked with my clients exclusively online. So I was quite early to the online space. And as a result, I was working with a lot of other online business owners who were really seeking out my services because they were starting to hear about kinesiology, and maybe they didn't have a kinesiologist in the town that they lived in. It wasn't very common outside of Australia. And so I was starting to get really booked out with online entrepreneurs now. And I developed a specialization in business. And so we bring it right up to today. Yes, I still work with one-to-one clients. Over the years, I've taught many different courses, but now I'm focusing on my mastermind. And what I do these days is there's still aspects of kinesiology and what I do, which is around tapping into what it is that your body needs and helping you to come back into a state of harmony and balance. But I've also studied Reiki and NLP and positive psychology and done a lot of business training. And so all of that is woven into the work that I do with clients, which is really always around helping you to clarify exactly what it is that you want and your aligned pathway to creating that, and helping you to release whatever it is that is blocking you from being able to create that.
Business does really amplify that, I believe. I know that I've been in business since I've been 23. My husband's in business, and it really is a personal development journey that isn't just about business to business. It is, I love the saying, you have to work harder on yourself than you do your business, because you are your business. And each day you are having to be self-motivated. You're having to look at what those blocks are. And before we hit record, you and I both shared about being able to evolve into the next version of ourselves and understanding when the alignment, your beautiful words and your process, when you're not aligned with it. So
That's right.
So do you see, when you work with women, I know that you work with women, what would you say is the most common block, or an example of, like, a little case study, how it usually goes when someone's in business? I know you've just shared about your own evolution of your business and then moving into working with high-level people who are CEOs. What is a common block that you mostly see with women?
It's a great question. So a few of the things that can tend to come up. Number one, overthinking is really common. So when you're running your own business, I'm sure many people who are listening can really relate to this. There are actually so many decisions to make and so many pathways that you can be going down at any one time. And then you can also have things that go wrong, in inverted commas, or perhaps aren't working the way they once did. A lot of people have experienced that in 2024. And when things are flowing, we might be, able to really connect to ourselves and find that space of clarity, which I know that you so beautifully support women to be able to find in themselves. But when we are in this kind of space where, we're feeling challenged or we're needing to make all of these different decisions, we can go into that space of overthinking. And I find that people can really get into the weeds. And it's really hard to discern when you are in that space what is the direction that I need to move forward in, what's actually going to make the difference here. And so a big part of what I do is help people to release some of that excess energy, because a lot of the work I do with people is energetic, and then to help them to reconnect to what their big picture actually is, so that they can really be clear on what it is that they do want to create over time. And then we can take that step back into the present and then look at the decisions that need to be made from that clearer starting point. So overthinking is a really big one. And second big one that I see very often is feelings of not being enough or not being good enough. And you might think that this is something that just comes up for you, or that it just comes up when you're starting out in business or in those earlier stages. But I have worked with clients at all different stages of business, including clients who have multi-seven-figure businesses. And this can come up at any stage. And it can come up when you're being called to evolve, when you're being called to grow, or you are gaining visibility or gaining in opportunities. And, it's triggering these feelings of imposter syndrome, or am I good enough? And am I going to be able to do that? Can I charge that? Will that sell in the way I desire it to sell? And so on. It's just very, very common. And so that's sometimes really important work that we need to be doing, is coming to that space of feeling like I am enough. And this leads into the third block that I see very commonly, which is around identity. And so our identity not being fully integrated. So sometimes, related to this feeling of not good enough, that might be an older belief or an older feeling that you have, or you might be reconnecting to times in the past where you didn't feel good enough. And it's not really relevant to the present, but you just haven't caught up to that. And I find this is very common for entrepreneurs, is that there are identities from the past that you have outgrown. And then also you will often, if you're an entrepreneur, have big visions for what it is that you're wanting to create and big goals that you are working towards, which can challenge your identity as well, because you're asking for more of yourself and you're wanting to step into that. And that can require a shift in how you see yourself and what you believe is possible for you and how it is that you're going to show up. So I find that it's very common that we are integrating your identity and updating it so that you're not feeling held back by the past and you're not feeling kind of scared about what it is that you're stepping into the future, that you're really stepping up into that next evolution of who you are.
That makes so much sense, Kerry. And those different flavors almost of not good enough, like the flavor of the imposter, not good enough imposter, the flavor of not good enough to be seen. I was thinking through my own little not good enoughs, and it is that past. And one that I was thinking through that you didn't mention was not good enough. I'm not smart enough, but always knowing that I'm smarter than I was last Tuesday. today's Tuesday. I'm smarter than the Emma was last Tuesday. And if I think of the Emma this Tuesday last year, I'm way smarter than her. But that's that allowing yourself to catch up with yourself, losing that identity. That is a light bulb moment for me just now. Thank you.
I love that. And it's making me think about another block that can come up, and that's around comparison. So yes, we can be comparing ourselves, but we can also be comparing to others. And it's just very rarely helpful to be comparing to what other people are doing. And I see this for even very successful entrepreneurs, the way they're able to diminish their own success and sometimes do not feel successful because of who they are comparing themselves to, or the standard that they think that they should be at. So once again, we can think these are things that only impact on us at a certain stage of business, but I can tell you it does not matter the stage, because however big your business is, if you have a $1 million business, you're probably comparing yourself to people who've got 8-figure businesses, and you're like, well, I could never do that, So it's really relevant for so many of us. And it's important to do this work, because otherwise it can really hold us back. You can learn the most exceptional strategies. You can know exactly what to do. But if you are the one who is getting in your own way, it doesn't matter what you know. You're not able to execute on it in the same way. And you're not able to show up consistently and to stay in it until it works.
That's that consistent bit too, isn't it? When you don't fully, because you have days where you feel up and you go, yep, I can do it today, but then you can't be consistent because you're dipping and you're not in this beautiful, like you use the word integrated. When we fully integrate the new version of ourselves, then we're able to be consistent. But when we're not, we're dipping in and out.
It's a really good example, actually, of something like consistency, which we can recognize. I'm not being consistent. And then we can beat ourselves up for that. Or we can think it's just a lack of discipline, or, something else. It's like, I should do that and I don't. And we're annoyed at ourselves. But oftentimes, sitting underneath the surface is one of these deeper reasons as to why we are not being consistent. And if we're able to identify what that is and actually shift it, well, yes, not only will we be probably more consistent, but we're probably going to show up in a way that feels even more authentic to ourselves, and to be able to do it in such a way that feels lighter and easier. I see far too many women pushing themselves because they are pushing past these blocks and emotions and past stories. And we all know when we are in this energy of pushing, and sometimes we think, well, I'm just going to have to push because it needs to happen and it needs to get done. But this can really come at an energetic and emotional cost to us over time. And we all know this because most of us have probably burnt out at some stage, or we have at least experienced dips in energy, which we know are because we've been overworking. We're often overworking because we are compensating for something. And so again, finding out what is actually sitting underneath that, it can be incredibly transformative. What I'm passionate about with this work is, first of all, helping people to unlock more of their potential, because I know that we are all capable of so much more than what we can often believe and what we're currently achieving or experiencing, and not from a place of like you always have to be doing better, but when we can create that greater sense of ease, we can unlock that. And the second thing is around allowing yourself to be able to create a life that actually works for you, a business that is actually aligned for you and that can be sustainable for you over time. So you're not pushing, you're not burning yourself out, you're not forcing, you're not beating yourself up as a mechanism to create what you want and then wondering why it doesn't feel as good as you hoped it would.
That's a great piece of information. So when we find ourselves going down, and it can be in any area of life, right? It doesn't even have to be business, but when we find ourselves saying things like, I'm just not consistent or I'm just not disciplined, that is a symptom of an underlying something. And then often, like you say, we do the overcompensation, which is push, 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 whatever that is, and then find ourselves, like you say, dips in energy. Burnout is massive, isn't it? Like that is massive in today's society because we didn't listen to those little, I love that saying, the universe will throw you, or our body, our emotions will throw us a pebble, a rock, and then a boulder. And the boulder is the burnout, right? But these pebbles and rocks are that language and that feeling of, I'm just not consistent, I'm undisciplined. But they're little, they're messages from our soul, aren't they?
And it's so true. And sometimes we really want the answer to be an easy answer as well. We're really hoping that the reason I'm not being consistent is because of this thing that happened when I was a child, and I can just release that and then I'm going to be able to move on. And that can definitely happen. I do see that. But it can also be the case that we are struggling with something like consistency because we can feel that we are coming out of alignment with what it is that we are offering. We are coming out of alignment with our business. Now, that is very inconvenient. So we don't want to see that, because what is on the other side of realizing you're coming out of alignment with your business, with your offers, is a lot of hard work. And you and I both know about this hard work, don't we, Emma? Because we have both experienced this. Would you like to share a little about your experience?
Yes. So before we hit record, I was just chatting to Kerry and saying to her how just recently I have changed my messaging. For years I've worked with women around the program called the Clarity Catalyst. And I just found it was really hard for me to articulate what the transformation was, even though I knew when women came through it, had incredible results and incredible transformation that was unique to each individual. But I kept feeling like I just wasn't able to articulate it. Underneath all of that, though, Kerry, has been an Achilles heel, I describe it as, which is my own story. And when we think about not good enough, and my flavor of not good enough is the visibility piece. And the flavor of the visibility piece is because, Emma, you're in a body that is larger than I think it should be, which is a size 14, size 16. And only that I had got really honest. And the process really started in 2018 for me when I decided to become a yoga teacher. And again, body work. I mean, you're literally your body of work, Kerry, but body, as in somatic body work. What is it? Our body keeps score. Our body knows the story. And then becoming a yoga teacher, starting to unravel this. And it's only just this year I feel like I'm going to use the word brave enough to actually share my body shame through the work I've gone through. And you and I just discussed before, I've gone and restudied, like you have, a whole, body confidence extra bit of coaching, which has been really challenging and incredibly confronting. But I feel like finally, when you mentioned the word authenticity, I feel like finally I'm able to actually show up as Emma and say, I have got a body story. And I think I know a lot of women do, and we think we're alone, but that has held me back in business. That has held me back in life. And even, when I've gone through this process, Kerry, every part of my life has been affected about my opinion about my body. It's massive.
Isn't it massive? And this is what I really see to be true when we're hitting up against some of those blocks and barriers in our own business, and we're starting to find that some things aren't working. There is more of ourselves to own and accept. There's more of our own story to own and accept. And that can be really challenging. And we need to have that real alignment with what it is that we are offering. So I guess that's what you were feeling like. I've got this big part of my story, which doesn't really come into this program, or maybe not as fully as it might. And then once you are able to create that alignment, which we all wish would just happen really seamlessly and very fast. And don't get me wrong, like I love an instant transformation. I've seen hundreds, or I don't know how many, like heaps, thousands maybe, of very, rapid transformations. People can have a complete shift in a moment, or they're a different person an hour into a call that we're having. But this type of work that we're talking about, it's not really like that. It's actually layered and it takes time. And so I had a similar understanding in a different way, where I started to realize this work that I was so passionate about around alignment. The truth was, it was only a small piece of now what it was that I was doing with my clients. And the inconvenient piece for me was really around time and around energy, because to unpack that, I've got 2 young children. This year I do work 3 days a week. Up till last year, I was working 2 days a week. I've been doing that for 6.5 years since I've had children. Like, not many people continue their business at that kind of level. And people don't usually realize that I actually do work so few hours in my business, but it didn't leave a lot of time and energy for all of this unpacking. But do you know what I used to experience and really need to be mindful of is the burnout cycle. And I support people in their energy. And it was something that I would periodically struggle with, and I'd often struggle when I was looking to grow my business. I would be like, okay, it's time. I'm ready. I'm ready for this expansion. I would lean into that, and then I'd find myself growing, but then I would hit up against my energetic boundaries, and then I would have to shrink back. Now, of course, I unpacked this in many, many different ways and came to some of the root causes, which were behavioral and mindset and stories and so on. But there was a bigger piece, which was actually strategic and structural, and it was to do with the way I was running my business. And so it was really to do with the way I was dispersing my energy and not being as boundaried and contained with that. So we talked before about me creating this mastermind. This is actually me creating containment in my business as well, and saying, do you know what? This is actually the way to work with me, that you are going to get results. And maybe it's a good enough story, actually, now that we're talking about that. I didn't yet, or hadn't yet had the confidence to say, this is how I can get you results. And if you come into this space, I'm going to take you through this business energetics work, these healing practices, and the psychology, the mindset pieces. And I'm going to support you with your strategy, which, once again, I didn't really own the amount of strategy work that I do with my clients and the way I teach them how to think. I was really comfortable behind the scenes, Emma. I was really comfortable in the seat of the healer, and I had to step into the seat or the stage of the leader. And that was the work that I really had to step into. And it was edgy. But until I did that, I was losing that sense of true authenticity that we're speaking about. No one else knew it. It wasn't like I was not being true to myself. It wasn't being false, but I wasn't really owning who I was and what I was capable of. I was hiding, and that's what needed to change.
And that identity of being the healer to the leader, and knowing that that can exist simultaneously in you at the one time. You didn't have to choose. But that's where the deep work comes from, is integrating that, owning that, and being okay with that.
Yes. And there is another piece to what you just said, which is just so perfect, is that I saw myself as the healer to the leaders. Right? And what I actually was also a leader.
Yes.
And so can you hear that good enough story that must have been playing underneath there? And it was so just nuanced. It wasn't hiding, it wasn't in plain sight, it was hiding.
Yeah.
And it was really, started to be more revealed. I started to just get these nudges, and then I couldn't ignore that anymore. And I had to do what I support my clients in, to get out of their own way and step into that next version of myself and stop hiding, and to go from the healer to the leader who equally does work with leaders.
Yeah. Because it's painful to stay. If you had have stayed as the healer, that causes more pain. And like we say, that pushing energy.
Yeah.
And that it's a different energy.
It's like they say, like that pain of staying inside the bud. How does that quote go?
Yeah, it's more painful. Yes, I know. It's a poem, isn't it? Yeah, it's
Nin or something like that. Yes, the pain of staying inside becomes greater than the pain of just actually letting yourself expand and allowing yourself to grow. So that's something I would love everyone to think about for themselves as they are listening as well. It's where you are holding yourself back, and where you are limiting yourself, and how is it that you can start to take steps into this potential that you are able to unlock. And you can use this conversation as a catalyst for that, because this is a container. I do work with business energetics, and business energetics is a lot about containers, and a conversation can be a container, and it creates a context for transformation to take place. So you can use this conversation as that context.
Yes. And do you feel that if someone was to, like, let's say someone's listening now, one of our listeners are listening now, and they're identifying that potentially one of their good enough, and they might be getting a clue to how it shows up, the imposter, however that shows up. What would be a first step that they could take to start to uncover it's probably a really broad question, Kerry, but what would you suggest?
This is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive, but I really do love to start with that question of what is it that you really want?
Yeah.
And allowing yourself to go there, because I'll tell you what can happen if we start asking, where am I blocked, and how am I holding myself back, and what's the problem, and all of this is, well, you can probably guess what the problem is. You end up staying in that space of problem hunting and problem finding, and maybe problem clearing as well. But essentially, we're staying in the problem, right? So we want to create a context around it. And the context is, what do I really want? And this question is not easy to answer. And I really discovered that actually in that room at Uluru, at Tina Tower's conference, because I asked the question, what do you really want? Like, what is your biggest goal? And I was shocked, because I hadn't been in front of a bigger audience in person for a number of years. And I did not expect so many people to look at me and to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
It shocked me. And I just realized how widespread this is in that moment, that we often don't know what we really desire. And so you need to ask yourself that question first. What do I really want? Like, if you look ahead 5 years, what do you really desire for your life? And don't just ask yourself this question once. Really allow yourself to go there and to journal on that. And we can get caught up in, the house that needs to be this, and the car, or the this and that. And that's fine if those things are a part of your vision. But to me, that's detail. Like, how do you want to be living? How do you want to be feeling? What do you want your lifestyle to be? And then if you've got a business, like, what does that actually look like? What's your dream within that? Certainly, it might be attached to a certain amount of revenue, but beneath that, what is it? And I actually did discover that for myself when I was like, I've had these income goals for a period of time and wasn't getting closer. And I realized that sitting underneath that, I actually really wanted to create a body of work, and I wanted to create way of working with me that I was really proud of. That's what actually really mattered to me. And then that gets to become the vehicle for creating that level of income. But I didn't just want to do it in any old way.
Yeah.
It mattered how. And that sounds so obvious when I say it out loud, but other people could be having that same realization. It matters how, right? So it's when you start to ask yourself those bigger questions about what is it that I actually want, then you have a context for understanding what it is that you're wanting to clear. So I've got a process which I teach, which I actually taught at a recent conference, Tash Corbin's conference in Noosa. I call it my Align and Dream Bigger process. So in that, the first step is clarify. So that's exactly what we're talking about. Then you move through the cycle into clear. And that's when you clear. So you might just, in the context of this vision you have or what it is that you want, you can then start to identify like the thoughts and the beliefs and the stories. I would just be naming those, just writing them down. And then if you want to keep it really simple, you could just have a very simple ritual around that. You could write them all down, rip up the piece of paper, burn the piece of paper and set that intention. I'm letting these go. Now, critically, from this space of clear, you want to keep on moving through this cycle and you want to step into claim. And because that is when you make a decision. So that's why I said we can get stuck actually in clear. Before I was like, we don't want to get stuck focusing on the problem because literally some people do this. So start with the problem. The problem's me and the problem is this belief or it's this story or it's this way of thinking or it's this emotion. And they fixate on clearing that, but without the context of clarify of what it is that you want, and without actually then at some point drawing a line underneath it and moving into claim and making a decision that you're going to take the actions that are required to create what you want, well, you're not actually moving anywhere. You're certainly not moving through this Align and Dream Bigger cycle. And so clarify, clear, claim, make sure you step into claim, and then you can continue to move back through the cycle. You either re-clarify or you've achieved a goal and then you dream bigger.
That is brilliant. And I do love that question. What do you want? And exactly like you're saying, when we're in Uluru, the amount of women in that who work on strategy, who have gone through a gazillion 90-day plans, 30-day processes, are quite on the surface, quite goal-driven. We would say we would have been in a room of incredibly goal-driven, but what do you want? Takes a bit of time and courage. And like you say, then clear. And I love that you said that because we can stay in that problem. This is a problem. I'm the problem. And it just stays in that negative loop. And you just then keep reinforcing, feel terrible, and it doesn't evoke. But what do you want keeps you looking, head up, looking forward. And then able to claim. And I like how you describe the claim bit is saying, well, if that's what I want, I know what I need to clear, rip it up and then move to the claim. The claim then is, if I'm correct, the claim is then going, well, what is one step I can take to get towards that?
Yeah.
What I want.
You actually move on from clearing and you make that decision. I am going to take the action. Therefore, what is the action to take? What are the problems I need to solve? We've moved on from thinking I'm the problem and we're looking at what are the problems to solve so that I can create what it is that I desire. Yes, the problem with staying in clear is we decide I'm not good enough or whatever it is that we've decided that's my block. Oh, I've got imposter syndrome. And it's like end of story. I've got imposter syndrome. I'm just trying to clear my imposter syndrome. Well, you could be clearing your imposter syndrome for a very long time, or you could just draw a line under that and decide you're going to move forward irrespective of the imposter syndrome.
Or even back to that identity, when you stay in that clear, you're identifying as an imposter, having imposter syndrome. Whereas I love how you even spoke from your own experience and said, I knew that I wanted to create something I was proud of. So even that in that whole identity is I can identify as that I have imposter syndrome, or I can identify that what I want is to be proud.
Right? Exactly. Changing that orientation. It's such a beautiful distinction you have just made of, rather than staying in the lack, staying in what I'm not, staying in, whatever the beliefs are, instead, what is the belief I need, or how am I willing to back myself? What am I willing to do? And if I do feel like an imposter, how do I need to support myself to take action in ways that are actually going to serve me? Because if I feel like an imposter, and I am also beating myself up and expecting perfection well, that's really not very supportive.
Yeah.
So would I also like to then be supportive of myself as this person who maybe is feeling like a bit of an imposter right now, so that I can move forward?
Yes. Yeah. And do you believe, Kerry, that the language could be helpful, even when you're talking through that then with the imposter? And I was even thinking about, and I'll often refer to myself as the old Emma, even earlier on when I said, I'm smarter this Tuesday than I was last Tuesday. So I'll often refer to the old Emma, and even around the body image opinion that I've had about myself, being a curvy woman and a yoga teacher, I will often refer and say, the old Emma, that would have worried her, and she would not have wanted to show up in her curvy woman body of fear of. But this Emma today knows that she is more than enough in this beautiful body. So I'll often, in a language, I will speak of the old Emma. Is that a helpful thing to do you believe?
As you're describing it, I can really see how that could be helpful, like as to creating that line in the sand and acknowledging, yes, I have had those feelings, I have had those emotions. I think the only thing I'd want to say here is to make sure we're being very compassionate with ourselves around that past identity, because I can see this. People are really willing to cut off the past, but it's almost like, I was like this then, and I was, I lacked in this and I wasn't that. And now in the present and in the future, I'm better. But it can actually be a little bit self-abusive when we're constantly wanting to beat up on these past versions of ourselves. If that past version is literally up until yesterday, then we're actually constantly, really pushing ourselves away and pushing away who it is that we are, and only feeling that we can accept this perfected version of ourselves rather than ourselves in our wholeness. So just keep an eye out for that as well. And I think it goes to show there's not particular hard and fast rules, but pay attention to how something feels and whether it feels supportive, whether it feels healthy, whether it feels sustainable as an approach and a way to move forward.
You're right. It is in the feeling. Because even back to being authentic and that identity, I know the feeling of when it is still lingering and when it feels even the word clear, so that I'm able to claim the next, whatever it is, I can definitely feel it in my body.
Yeah, that's perfect. And I think that's a part of that body literacy and the emotional literacy that we're able to develop with ourselves when we do this work over time, isn't it? And I often feel that really a lot of the work that I'm doing with my clients is teaching them how to think. Like how to think about their businesses, how to think strategically, but also how to think about their own mindset and the ways that they are supporting themselves, and also how to think about, this human experience that we're having that is very natural. We don't always want it to be that if there's something like negative that we want to be cutting that off either, or discarding that, because it is actually a part of being human. As much as we might be on an improvement journey, it's really not that we're ever going to arrive in a space of perfection anyway. And so why not just enjoy the human experience that we are having?
Yeah. And like your example, the CEOs and the leaders that you work with who are on 7, 8 figures upwards still have the same, it never changes. We're always cycling through. But I guess it's, when we keep cycling through, I don't want to say how quickly we move through it, but how conscious maybe we move through it, or how aware we are. Would that be the right wording?
I think it's how much we let it hold ourselves back.
Yeah.
Would be the distinction. And so for someone who is able to achieve less success up until this point, and success being me creating what I desire to create, because of course, success is different for everyone. We know that those patterns are running very strongly if we really feel like those things are holding us back from doing what it is that we are required to do to create what it is that we desire. And although it might be that those patterns can come up for my clients who have achieved a greater level of success, they do not hold them back in the same way. So it might be more like a shadow of that experience. It might be when they feel challenged by something, or when they are stepping into a greater level of growth or changing direction in some way. That's when that might be triggered, but it's going to be relatively quick to clear. And sometimes it just might be a recognition, oh, that story is coming up, or that old pattern is coming up, but it's not a big process to move through it necessarily. It's just a recognition, and then we move on. It's like, oh, that's not helpful here. And onwards we go back into that forward orientation of who is it that I'm becoming, and what's true for me now.
Yeah. And I love, like you said, what do I want to create? And it's not about comparison, or it's just going, what do I want to create? What impact do I want to make? And that's why, I mean, a lot of people are in business, and people just, what we do, most of us are here because we want to create good, and we want to be of value and make everybody else's life wonderful as well as our own. That's, I think, most people, that's what we want.
That's right. Certainly a lot of the people who we are connected with.
Yes, which is a beautiful thing. So, Kerry, tell me how, if someone's listening and they are interested in your mastermind, is there a time that the doors open, or how does that work?
So you can take a look at all the information at alignandattract.com/mastermind. And there are intakes for the mastermind, and the next intake is the 1st of February. So if you're reading through the information and you're feeling like, oh, this really does feel like this could be a really great opportunity and experience with me. I am seeking growth in my business and also in me personally, because this is really what the work that I do is about. It's really about you expanding your own leadership and you expanding what you believe is possible, and then the way that is then able to ripple out into the quality and type of work that you are able to create, and how you're able to show up for yourself as you are selling that work and sharing it with the world. Then you can reach out to me on Instagram if you would like, at Kerry Rowett. I'm so happy to have a conversation with you about that. And I also work with private clients as well in a retainer. And so if your business is at kind of multi-six figures, that could be a really beautiful thing to look at as well. Multi-6 or 7 figures are the typical clients I work with in that way. So you can find that information on my website as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kerry. I have loved our conversation today. It's always wonderful to chat to you, and I cannot wait to watch this beautiful mastermind unfold. And wouldn't it be wonderful that I get to a point in my business where I'm one of your members? Wouldn't that be wonderful? There you go. When you ask me, what do you want? There we go. We put it in the ethos, Kerry, right?
Well, let me give you a little business energetics tip with that. Do you have a space where you, like this for your business?
Yes.
Right. And so what can be really beautiful, this is for anyone who's listening, just with any business related goal, can be really lovely to have a space, like perhaps on a shelf. I've got a shelf in my office that is set up to hold the energy of my business. And then you can put your goals and your wishes onto a piece of paper and pop it into that space. In Emma's case, could be joining my mastermind, which would be so exciting. And, you know, you can be a certain number of clients you're wanting to work with, or a launch you might be having, and you just put that and ask for the energetics of the business to be supporting you with that intention. And you can even say, like, I want to reach this point and then I'll be able to join the mastermind, like set those kind of conditions and then ask the business to support you in that.
Oh, I love that. And one of my favorite podcasts that you did, and I shared it with so many of my business friends, was the one where you write a love letter to your business. What episode is that? I should have written that down. I've actually got it saved. I've listened to it so many times. I actually have it saved in my podcast list. I wonder what episode it is.
Don't worry, we'll put it into the show notes.
We'll put it in the show notes. But for anyone who is listening, Kerry has done a gorgeous podcast episode which describes and steps you through how to write a love letter to your business.
This is a business energetics exercise. Oh my gosh. So yes, listen to the podcast episode, but I'm sure I said it in the podcast episode, but the letter I believe that I share is the actual letter that I wrote to my business in 2010. And I asked my business, this is the way I did it. I said, Dear Awaken Kinesiology, the name of my business, like, what do you want? What would help you to feel happy and sparkly? Love, Kerry. And then I wrote the response, right? And so you're just writing without excessively thinking about it and just seeing what comes through. But to your point, Emma, what can come back can be very illuminating and surprising and also really helpful in you understanding what it is that your business really wants. So it's a really great exercise to try, even if it does sound a little bit different, a little bit woo. It can really give you a different insight that you haven't had.
When I sold my yoga studio, I wrote a letter to my yoga studio thanking her and releasing her.
That is so beautiful.
I also sat with a friend and she said, what's your date? And I said, the 31st of March. I handed the keys to the new owner on the 31st of March.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. And that was the letter that I wrote. And I just did a big gratitude piece because I found at some points with my beautiful yoga studio, I was beating up on her, telling her I want more and this and that. You can get into that with your business when I listened to that beautiful podcast and that process, and then when I went to release her and sell her, I needed to write a letter and thank her. And also it was a beautiful closure to say that, look, what we created, I birthed you, we had this wonderful time, and now it's time to send you on to the next beautiful owner.
And it's just a piece of business energetics, which I really love exploring with my clients around seeing your business as this separate energy. And so what a beautiful way that you were able to close out that relationship, understanding that you have a relationship with your business is really interesting to think about, because for some people that identity can become very enmeshed. It can feel like it is one and the same. And like you said, you can develop these healthy dynamics in the way you are interacting with your business that do not serve you. So
yeah. So I will pop that podcast episode in the show notes. So anyone who wants to go ahead and do that beautiful experience. Yes.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Kerry. Always an absolute honour and pleasure to be in your company, dear friends. So thank you again. And everyone, I no doubt you will enjoy this. And please, I'll have, Kerry, all of your details and bits and pieces in the show notes. But thank you, my love.
Thank you.